Okay, we're officially live, right, Jeremy? Are we on? We're broadcasting? We're live. Okay, great.
Not yet, but I still have to call roll.
Okay, if you're just settling in or joining virtually, welcome to Community Board 7 Transportation Committee. My name is Katie Walsh. I'm the chair, and John DeLuper is the vice chair. Bill, we have 2 agenda items, and there's time for public comment for both. So the first agenda item is going to be a presentation of a study and its recommendations, and it's going to be presented by the New York Economic Development Corporation, EDC, in partnership with DOT, and this covers the study recommendation on one-way conversions on First and Second Avenue, and they'll get more and some side streets. They'll get more into those details. And then the second is a committee discussion on the Brooklyn Queens Expressway revisioning design. This is something that the city is taking on overall, and DOT has come and presented and done some workshops with this community in the last year and a half. So this is following many meetings that we've had on this topic, and we will leave time for the second agenda item for a discussion amongst transportation committee members on the BQE South design proposal that has a focus on our community. There is time for public comment. So I just want to say, if you're somebody who is here on wanting to log public comment, we leave 3 minutes for that. And we also leave time for questions. So with that, I will turn to Jeremy and we'll do roll call of transportation members.
So I'm going to call roll now. If you are joining us on Zoom, please remember to unmute yourself, acknowledge, and then mute yourself again. Let's start with Katie Walsh.
Present.
You, John DeLuper.
Present.
Thank you, Damian Andrade. I'm just going to be checking also, make sure. Joan Body.
Here.
Thank you, Jerry Chan.
Here.
Thank you, Gabino Morales Escamilla.
Present.
Thank you, Zachary Jacy. Daniel Kaminsky. Angie Lau.
Hi.
Thank you. Roberto Martinez. Marilyn Melman. Jamie Nelson. Thank you. Sam Sierra.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you. Cindy Vanderbosch.
Present.
Thank you. Chairperson Julio Pena III. Thank you. Katie, roll has been called and we have a quorum.
All right, great. So with that, we'll start with our first agenda item, which is a presentation from New York Economic Development Corporation. And there are a couple people here, so I'm not sure who is doing the presentation, but yes, great. So if you can introduce yourself and get started. And for those who are joining virtually, just in terms of process and those in the room, so we'll have a presentation. We will first have any committee members who have questions. We'll get first call, we'll do that in the room, and then we'll ask if any committee members have questions online. We'll go through those, and then we'll leave time for questions from those that are in the room and then those virtually. So just so you have a sense of the flow. Great, thank you. And definitely use the mic because we have folks tuning online, so we need, yeah.
Hello. Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Vanger, Brooklyn Borough Director, New York City EDC. Thank you guys all for being here. I'm joined by my colleague, Jennifer Sun, Executive Vice President of the Planning Division at EDC. I have a few more colleagues from EDC here, as well as our colleagues from the Department of Transportation. So we're here to present on a study of the one-way pair in Sunset Park and the 51st Footbridge. We do have some agenda items, I think should be pulled up on the screen in a bit. But we could definitely get started, and Jennifer Sun, my colleague, will speak more about what this study entailed and kind of go through our agenda items, and then DOT will do some more information as well. Thank you.
Why don't you join this meeting and then you can. Yep, okay, I got the date.
Okay, awesome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Sun, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the Planning Division, which includes the Transportation and Waterfront Department. I will preface my presentation by saying that the most knowledgeable person who was involved in leading this traffic study with Sam Schwartz at EDC, unfortunately, is no longer with EDC. I share that with you because my presentation will be high level. You will by far have deeper local knowledge about the traffic conditions, the challenges in the neighborhood than I will. But my being here hopefully will not overly frustrate you if I'm not able to answer detailed questions about the study. But I'm happy to share more after today's presentation if there are questions that I can answer in the moment. The reason for us being here to talk about the one-way pair is because recently EDC and DOT partnered together to submit a federal grant application to the US DOT called RAISE. And in that application, we proposed 3 projects in Sunset Park, including the one-way pair conversion, the 51st Street float bridge activation, and implementation of a segment of the Brooklyn Greenway. So it was important for us then, at the request of this committee, for us to provide an overview of that study and to talk about how, if we receive that federal grant, we would coordinate the design and implementation of those projects with other projects in the neighborhood. So to start, or at least just to provide an overview, I will talk again at a high level about some background on where the study came from, the methodology that the consultant used to understand existing traffic conditions, and what the impacts and benefits might be from changing the traffic flow. We'll talk a little bit about the RAISE grant, what we actually applied for, and then walk through a hypothetical timeline that helps you understand if we were to receive the grant in June, for example, when we expect to be notified, what then would happen in terms of a timeline. And then we can turn it over to DOT to also provide an update about a number of studies and projects that are in different phases of design and implementation. So to start with one-way pair, oh, sorry, next slide. So just to start, like, where did this study came from? It actually originated from a 2016 transportation study in Sunset Park. That study looked at the need for infrastructure improvements and improving wayfinding to really improve pedestrian and bicycle safety, as well as better traffic flow in the neighborhood. So some of the key recommendations were, in fact, to improve vehicular wayfinding for drivers, to repair the roadway infrastructure in Sunset Park, to also address flooding and drainage issues. And then also it recommended actually taking a closer look at this idea of converting First Avenue and Second Avenue to one-way streets. As you know, they are currently two-way roadways. And the purpose of that, the potential benefits of doing that, was to really address the conflicts between cars and rail, pedestrians and bicyclists on First Avenue and Second Avenue, and how a one-way pair might actually improve the conditions to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, and also for drivers, so that they're not in a situation where, out of a frustration of waiting behind a rail car, they start turning into oncoming traffic that then creates even more hazardous conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers. So we followed up in 2019 by engaging a consultant through EDC's consultant retainer, Sam Schwartz, to analyze this with more traffic data. This included a lot of outreach to key institutions, including NYU Langone, because we wanted to be sensitive about emergency services and making sure that we were not creating a situation where ambulances would actually have a harder time of delivering services. And we also wanted to be sensitive to the industrial businesses and their needs as well, in addition to balancing that with residents and bicyclists. Between 2019 and 2022, there was a disruption with the pandemic. So the study started, we had to put the study on hold. Then we resumed the study after the pandemic and finished it in 2022. And so there have been updates to the Sunset Park Task Force and to Community Board 7 through that process. And where we are today is that if there were not this federal grant opportunity, this project was basically inactive because there was no funding either at EDC or DOT to do further design or construction. So it was a study that was waiting for more funding to move forward. Next slide. So just to provide an overview of the Sam Schwartz study, as I mentioned, there was a lot of outreach to key stakeholders, including NYU Langone, the two public schools at the time around 59th Street and 60th Street, community-based organizations like Uprose, the Community Board, and then industrial stakeholders, including an Industry City, the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation, which represents industrial businesses in Sunset Park, and then a lot of coordination with other city agencies. So we were working closely with DOT, but also got input from NYPD, FDNY, the MTA, and sanitation, because we wanted to be sensitive to their needs given the municipal services in the area as well. The study basically took traffic counts from previous studies, but also collected new traffic counts at intersections. They did vehicle classifications. They took a very detailed parking inventory. There were a lot of on-street observations from the consultants to really understand driving behavior and conflicts. So there was a lot of observations of conflicts to identify particularly hazardous intersections where they saw a lot of conflicts between cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists. They also created sort of a model that looked at the future without these improvements, and then compare that with the future if they actually converted First Avenue into a one-way roadway northbound and Second Avenue southbound. And the study area, sorry, I should have been more clear, is 39th Street on the north, 60th Street on the south, 4th Avenue on the east, and the waterfront on the west side. So that was the study area boundaries where this data collection happened. Out of that study and analysis, Sam Schwartz did recommend that we consider converting First Avenue between 39th Street and 58th Street to a one-way northbound roadway. And then to convert Second Avenue between 39th Street and 56th Street into one-way southbound. And the reason why the southbound one-way would only be to 56th Street rather than to 58th Street is because that actually reflects NYU Langone feedback, that they wanted it to be maintained as a two-way roadway from 56th Street north, 56th Street south, in order to maintain emergency service access. In addition to the First Avenue and Second Avenue one-way pair, they also looked specifically at 59th Street and 60th Street at potentially converting those streets between Second Avenue and 4th Avenue into a one-way pair. The reason being two public schools at the time and the planning of a third school in that area. There was traffic analysis that showed that by converting 59th Street one-way eastbound and 60th Street westbound one-way between 2nd Avenue and 4th Avenue would actually improve pedestrian safety, pedestrian crossings, reduce conflicts between cars and pedestrians dramatically. In fact, the intersection, as you probably well know, at 3rd Avenue and 60th Street, at the time and maybe still today, had the highest crash incidents and a really high rate of conflict. So that was the reason why they focused on that particular area. Next slide. So this is just a visual diagram that shows what I've just tried to describe. So we see first in red, the recommendation to turn First Avenue one-way northbound and 2nd Avenue one-way southbound. And then 59th Street one-way eastbound and 60th Street one-way westbound. And to give a little bit of context, we were highlighting, certain institutions that we were particularly sensitive about, the public schools and NYU Langone. Maybe next slide to talk about the project benefits. Really what was driving these recommendations was to fundamentally improve traffic flows so that rail service wouldn't be disrupted between SIMS and the MTA's needs for bringing old subway cars out of the system, introducing new rail cars, subway cars into the system, reducing double parking, conflicts between rail and cars, and then to also create the opportunity to begin to think about a greenway, an extension of the Brooklyn Greenway between 39th Street and 58th Street. Because by turning both First Avenue and Second Avenue into one-way roadways, you then create the opportunity of reclaiming a travel lane, for example, and converting that potentially into a protected two-way bike lane. And so DOT paused their greenway planning work, recognizing that it was important to advance the one-way pair first, and then take a closer look at whether the greenway should be put on First Avenue or on Second Avenue. And I'll turn to DOT to talk more about how they would take a closer look at that. I think those are the overall highlights. I think also by reducing these conflicts, it should have the benefit of also reducing congestion. So there's less idling, traffic flows better. It also improves air quality in the neighborhood. Okay. So now turning to the RAISE grant. As I said, until there was a moment in time where recently we learned about this opportunity to apply for federal funding, really through the Deputy Mayor of Operations, who plays a role in coordinating city agency applications across city government and applying for federal funding. This project was pretty much put on a shelf because it didn't have the funding to move forward. But at the urging of the Deputy Mayor of Operations staff, EDC and DOT came together to put an application forward for potentially securing the funding to design and implement the one-way pair, and also to activate the 51st Street float bridge, which had previously been in service in receiving rail cars by barge between New Jersey and Brooklyn until Hurricane Sandy in 2012 destroyed the rail float bridge. So after 2012, that rail float service happened between Brooklyn, 65th Street Rail Yard, and New Jersey rather than at 51st Street. The reason why EDC is interested in restoring service at 51st Street is because it could have the potential benefit of reducing rail traffic between 51st Street and 65th Street Rail Yard. So then you might have a segment that no longer has rail and car conflicts because you have the rail traveling between 51st Street instead, and SBMT and SIMS. Then the last project is the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway. We saw this as an opportunity to secure some funding to begin to design and implement a segment between 50th Street and 58th Street. So in total, we submitted a $50 million request to USDOT. We expect to be notified of whether we receive that funding in June of this year. So the next slide will help us understand if we were to get the grant, what would happen in terms of our process of moving that project forward in relationship to SBMT going into construction imminently to support the offshore wind development by Equinor, as well as a relatively soon construction project to be started at the Made in New York campus with Steiner Studios Film Studios development. So you'll see that if we were to get the grant in June, there's actually more planning that needs to happen as well as engagement, meaning we would come back to the community board, we would let you know that we received the award, but then we would, together EDC and DOT, present a preliminary design scope. and then talk about how the Greenway, where would it be, First Avenue, Second Avenue, get your feedback about our proposal for integrating the Greenway into the one-way pair project, how the 51st Street float bridge activation would also work, how that would be designed in order to preserve open space access while also supporting, an active rail service on that campus. But what you should see on this timeline is, so the Equinor construction will, at its peak period, be in around 2026. And we will still be in basically design and construction procurement for the RAISE grant projects during that time. So there's no construction happening for one-way pair 51st Street or the Brooklyn Greenway when the Equinor and the mini projects are in construction. We expect that the construction of the RAISE projects would not start until those two other projects are basically winding down towards construction completion. Next slide. I'll turn it to DOT to talk about the lots of projects that are underway.
Hey, good evening all. Thank you for joining us tonight on this very rainy day. You guys are troopers. My name is Emily Rickhelman. I'm at the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office at DOT. I'm joined here by Bhavin Patel, my colleague. So I'm just here to speak on some of the transportation initiatives in Sunset Park that DOT is in construction or going to happen in the near future. We have the Waterfront Greenway Hamilton Ave Gowanus connector. The limits to that is going to be 29th Street to Hamilton. Scope is going to be constructing a two-way bike path and sidewalk on the west side of 3rd Avenue. It says in construction, but it's not in construction yet. So that's my bad. Pedestrian ramps and upgrades, that's happening all throughout the corridor, mostly in the 40s and 50s. We're bringing all the pedestrian ramps up to ADA compliance. There's also going to be under L metered parking. You already saw we transformed the under L space into metered parking. We will continue that further up underneath the Gowanus. However, we are waiting on DDC construction and we will need to remove the cobblestone in order to move that forward. So again, waiting on DDC for that one. The BQE visioning study, the limits to that, of course, are the BQE corridor. That is ongoing outreach. If you guys want to come to a meeting tomorrow, April 4th, sorry, at 6:30 p.m. You're welcome to. The next project we have is 58th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues. I know the board has been waiting for this a long time, and it's adding a protected bike lane and installing bus boarding islands. That status is implementation is upcoming in the spring. You guys have heard about 3rd Avenue. The scope of that is a lane reduction and a protected bike lane, which was voted in favor by the board, I believe, at the last meeting.
60 seconds.
What do you mean? 54th Street. Oh, yeah. Sorry. The 4th Ave Capital Project, you'll see Phase A is it is anticipated to be completed in August 2025. That is a reconstruction of the medians only. After that wraps up, it'll move into Phase B, and Phase B is going to be taking a lot of the painted ped island spaces on 4th Avenue and making that in concrete. That will be expected to start in 2026. And of course, I'll notify the board ahead of time when that happens. And again, we have the Brooklyn Waterway Greenfront Capital Project. That is another bike lane. it's on 29th Street between Second Ave and Third Avenue, and then it goes down on Second Avenue between 29th and 39th Street. That anticipated construction start is July 2026. I've reviewed all these with the board, so this should not be anything new. If it is, then I probably haven't been doing my job right. So if you have any questions, let me know.
You say what the meeting, the BQE visioning meeting is tomorrow that you just brought up?
Yeah, so that's going to be talking about the Manhattan Bridge interchange and seeing what improvements can happen there. So this is for Central, BQE Central, but open to anybody.
And then since we're going to go back to this study presentation, what was DOT's involvement in the study and the recommendations?
Bobbin, do you want to take that? So Bobbin was here at the time that all this was occurring, so.
Hey, good evening. So DOT's role basically was, we reviewed the study that Sam Shorts gave and made additional recommendations as far as any conditions that we saw that needed to be addressed in their study.
So one of the things, I mean, I'll pose it here and, but we're going to open up, is just the last time that we heard about the study, if you go back, it's 2019. So we found out about this conclusion of the study and the recommendations at a Sunset Park Task Force meeting. So just to clarify, the reason that you're here tonight and the Transportation Committee is having this meeting is because there's a proposal to have changes to our streets. And this is coming to us for the first time after hearing about it in another forum. So just to state for the record, we have an expectation that there should be more engagement that is more current. This goes back almost 10 years, also in terms of when things and the reviews were done. And I think a lot of what you're going to hear tonight is specific questions, but it's also like how this process unfolded. COVID aside, we shouldn't be sitting in 2024 hearing about this. And we've raised this with EDC, but DOT is the transportation agency. And so again, I would love your response to that, like understanding why we're finding ourselves here tonight in this situation.
So, I mean, like you mentioned, 2019 was basically when COVID sort of started gearing up. So the study at that point was looking for more additional funding to continue. Whatever Sam Short's recommendations at that time was, it didn't fully complete as far as design. And then with the lack of funding, that's where it was sort of shelved off. There was no, I wouldn't call it like a complete design study at that time. So that's why there was nothing to really come to the board at that time to show as far as like, okay, this is what First Avenue is going to look like. This is what Second Avenue is going to look like. So at that point, there really wasn't anything to present. Yeah.
But the implementing agency, I mean, EDC is EDC. You guys are DOT. So these are your streets. These are your signals. So the accountability here is DOT coming to us. And this is, again, the way this unfolded is very problematic. So we find ourselves here tonight. We're going to get into the specifics, but you know, we have more questions. Like if there are recommendations on some of the things that the study says, like what is our partnership? What does the changes look like? Because here we are having a grant have already been submitted. Like what is the scope of those types of changes that are possible?
So I mean, the grant is like the EDC mentioned, the grant is basically getting additional funding to see what the design will look like. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is, the next step is just implementation. This is still gonna go back to design. There's actually gonna be a need for additional data collection because time has elapsed from the original data collection. Obviously, there's been development, COVID has changed traffic patterns. So it's, I don't want to say it's like a whole fresh new study, but there would be sort of a relook at you know, whatever that was recommended with additional counts. And then design obviously would happen where obviously the community board would be involved in that phase.
Okay, and then I'll move on, sorry, because there's lots of questions, I'm sure, but are you looking for, so this community board just went through a very long process for, in terms of participation and engagement related to a vote on Third Avenue. Are you, is DOT looking for, not tonight, but are you looking for us to vote on our, on this design proposal for the one-way conversions?
Yes.
So in the future, you will be looking for Community Board 7 to have a vote on the proposals that we're seeing in front of us tonight.
I wouldn't say exactly what we're seeing tonight, at a later time when we do have some sort of design.
Okay, all right. So with that kind of context broadly set, if there are transportation committee members who are in the room that have any questions, you can put your hand up. And then we'll go to people who are online virtually. And if you wanted to start off.
Yeah, well, I can kick it off. Kick it off, but I have a lot of kind of multi-part ones, so I may just do a few and maybe come back to me. But so first off, the Sam Schwartz studies you're referencing, we had to request these things from EDC through freedom of information laws, so that's kind of not the way it should be. In the future, I think it would be better if you could share this stuff with us in advance so that we can, have more time to digest it. That said, the study was very interesting and I read through it, and I kind of had some concerns about some of the assertions that were made. There was stuff about the MTA and their buses. So first off, has either EDC or DOT factored in the Brooklyn bus redesign, which calls for changing the 3 different bus routes that are, changing 2 bus routes that go down in that area and potentially adding a new one?
So obviously at the time that the original study was done, the Brooklyn redesign did not exist at that time. So that's part of the grant would be to look at some of those things where, how does that impact the redesign and what we were looking at originally?
And the study also made recommendations for rebuilding the sidewalks in the area and actually adding new ones. Now, the last time EDC did that in the area was from 58th to 65th Street with the Owl's Head connector. And during that process, they removed a lot of curb cuts and all that. Would any of the changes be similar? Because already First and Second Avenue have a lot of areas where there's no curb cuts, so it is very hard for the pedestrians to go there. And taking away seems like
Talking about curb cuts in reference to like pedestrian ramps or?
Yeah, pedestrian ramps.
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't have a design yet, exactly which intersections, but obviously whatever intersections that would be needed with pedestrian access with the ADA, those would be upgraded. I would assume so. But again, I can't speak exactly, what the scope will be right now.
Since the study area goes all the way up to 65th Street, even though the recommendations stop at 56, would there potentially be any changes, or would there be potential for us to suggest changes between 56th and 65th Street?
Yeah, I mean, I think once we come back with some sort of design and going forward with depending on the grant, we would obviously have input from you guys.
And then one-way pairs, like, are you guys gonna host like workshops to get more of this feedback? I know I work in the Bronx, and I know the RAISE grant was done, I think also in conjunction between EDC and DOT. And there, they got the grant and then they had to host a whole other plan of workshops. So that's kind of what you're expecting to happen, and then you'll present like a more fulsome plan?
That's something that we will have to discuss with EDC and get back to you on.
Ask many more, but I'll turn it over to everyone else in the committee.
So if you're a committee member, and if you have a question, you can put your hand up in the room. Okay, if not, if there's any committee members virtually. Okay. So if you're, and then we'll go back to the room for anyone in the room who has questions. So I'll just give Jeremy a second. No hands up. At least one hand up from, great. Okay, we can open up for Cindy.
Hi, Thank you. Thank you for coming and giving this presentation tonight with the updates. I just have a thought, like the First Avenue already is, I'm wondering about turning it to one way and the impact that that's going to have on speeding on First Avenue, because in my experience, going down First Avenue, I drive and also bicycle down First Avenue. And I'm concerned because it does seem like it's a place where there's speeding. Obviously, I don't have the data, but just anecdotal observation. And then it's also, there's a lot of businesses that are close to there that kind of use it as a semi parking lot. And then there's also a lot of people that park who have special permits or whatever. So that ends up with like double parking. So I'm just wondering, like I hear the need for like a better design, but I'm concerned that by turning it into one way that it would increase speed. And I'm just wondering, I realize you don't even have the funding hasn't come through from the grant. But I'm wondering if that would be something that you would sort of revisit as the actual data about as you're like working on the redesign of the redesign, so to speak. If that would be something that you'd be looking at, because I'm even just concerned about, like, on one hand, I see the need to have safer sort of bicycle traffic, but like that street as it is just does not feel safe. So I'm just wondering about like mitigating speeding if you turn it into a one-way, and whether the data kind of address that question, or if you need to get back to us about that when and if it gets funded by the grant.
Yeah, so regarding the speeding issue, like I said, we don't have a design as far as what those avenues would look like, but we would implement from our toolkits all the traffic calming features, whether it's bump outs, we would stagger the signals. So there's various things that can be done as far as traffic calming that would curtail or address that issue with the speeding. The second part as far as the parking. So one of the things that the one ways actually helps is, I mean, double parking is something that's almost like, like a bagel in New York City, right? It's everywhere. So with the current condition of a two-way, when vehicles do double park, vehicles have to go into the opposing direction, which is actually a hazard. So the one-way reduces that issue with opposing vehicles and friction. So, it would make it safer. Obviously, like I said, it's very hard to curtail double parking without the lack of enforcement. So we would work with NYPD as we can, but again, that's something that would be needed to be addressed with enforcement.
Thank you. And I guess like one quick follow-up is that another thing is that with the speeding, there's very few places where cars actually have to stop. I know there's maybe two stop signs, but there's no lights. And it just does feel like one of the places where enforcement is minimal. And then we have to think about the activation of the Steiner facility and the Made in New York campus and the increase in volume around there. So I'm excited about anything that's going to make it safer, but going down and observing what's happening now to kind of learn from that and see how we're going to kind of adapt and change the traffic patterns, I think is really important, because it does feel to me like one of the more chaotic streets in the area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, we would look at any traffic calming measures, including if any streets meet any sort of warrants, whether it's for, signal or a stop sign. But again, that's based on, the data that's going to be collected. So we can't speak to any particular intersections at this time.
So on that point, are there traffic engineering, are there studies, is one-way safe? Do people use it for drag racing? Like, where are there examples of other one-ways, and what is the difference in safety as a result?
So just to give a little background, so my unit specifically does that like full-time, like we do studies for one-way conversions. And we implement roughly 30 to 35 different locations throughout the city ranging from 1 block to 30 blocks. And in our post-implementation studies, we haven't noticed any conditions where speeding does increase. I'm not gonna say it's impossible, but overall speeding hasn't been an issue, like, because normally we get feedback from the community board or residents after the conversions are made, and that's hasn't been something that's been brought up. So, you know, like I said, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna have one vehicle doing that, but it's not like a condition that gets increased with the conversions.
And then there's the proposal for the one-ways on 60th and 59th Street. Can you say more about why that is a requirement or why that's being proposed?
So that originally came out from the need to improve the conditions at the intersection of Third Avenue and 60th Street. There, as you know, and EDC mentioned, there has been a lot of crashes in that with injuries at that intersection, and being at a school intersection. There was a previous study that was done that highlighted those issues, especially with turning vehicles and kids crossing. So one of the things that one-way conversions actually do is they reduce the turning and pedestrian conflicts. For regular, let's say a four-way intersection, if you have two ways on each, it reduces the conflict points by like half.
Can I follow up on this? The call to open 59th Street to traffic increases the conflicts at an
So that's-
intersection that was really
Yeah.
successful in reducing conflicts, I think.
So I think part of that is we would leave that closed. We would not open that section of 59th Street under the Third Avenue. That would still stay closed.
So say that again. So you said you would or you would not,
We
open,
would prefer not to, yes.
but EDC wants to open it.
I believe that Sam Schwartz had made the recommendation.
Okay.
But that's something, like I said, we had looked at not opening that and look at viable routes to reroute that traffic that would have to access going eastbound. And we had worked with our freight mobility unit to address that situation, which I think the board had mentioned.
Other questions in the room? So Jeremy, and then we can go to Julio. And then we're gonna open it up because we have people in the room who came who want to be able to ask some questions.
So since 60th Street would no longer be two ways, you would have to move a truck route, which I assume would be 59th Street, except you don't want to open 59th Street. So how would the trucks get through?
Yeah, so that's something that we'd have to work with our freight mobility team to look for a viable alternate to that, you know, eastbound truck traffic.
Would First and Second Avenues remain two lanes in one direction, or would you reduce it to one lane?
For the whole corridor, well, First Avenue, I believe, was maintained as one lane. And I believe sections of Second Avenue were two lanes due to just to have a better traffic flow.
And am I correct? Did I just hear that we're going to spend $50 million because we won't enforce double parking?
No, you did not.
Sounded that way.
No, so
Let me ask it
well,
this way.
I mean-
How can we get double parking enforced?
and like I mentioned, that's something that we would have to work with the NYPD. That's something.
Explain how you're working with NYPD on that.
Our office has a NYPD traffic safety liaison who works directly with all Brooklyn precincts as well as one PP.
Have they been directed to enforce double parking on First and Second Avenue?
No.
So we have a question, and then we'll turn to people in the room who came as well.
I'll try to be super brief. First, I know Avenue N in Sheepshead Bay. I don't even know if that's the correct neighborhood. Apologies, my fellow Brooklynites. I do know that that is a one-way street, and there is a ton of speeding. So I share Cindy's concern regarding converting First Avenue to one-way. There are no traffic lights. There are no stop signs from I believe, the hospital all the way down to 39th Street. So I feel like we're just making it easier for people to do donuts on First Avenue. Exactly. Then they drag race all over the place. So that's one concern. My second, I already forgot what the second one is. But in regards to traffic enforcement and double parking, we need significant improvements on enforcing that on First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, Fourth Avenue, and Fifth Avenue. 8th Avenue, thank you, Jerry. I myself got a double parking ticket Saturday morning for double parking less than 3 minutes while I was helping my mother get out of the vehicle. So we're enforcing in parts of the neighborhood where there are no issues of double parking, but we're not enforcing in areas where it is a significant issue that affects bus routes, it affects ambulances, it affects emergency vehicles. And like, I'll pay the parking ticket, I double parked, but we're enforcing in areas that doesn't have an issue and not focusing on the areas that do.
So two questions. First question is regarding 60th Street, the one way. Yeah, we are doing this because of the school, the elementary school that is there, right? So if you look at it on the other side of the Third Avenue, there's another school. So it doesn't matter which one way you turn, you still go impact the school, right? So does it make, yeah, the other side is also a school.
Yeah, on 59th. Between which avenues? The second and first? Second and third? Okay.
Yeah, so
59th Street, Second and Third is the entrance for
Yeah, the
MF
corner.
939 and PS 936.
one is elementary school, one is a middle school, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, we need to come back with a real study, right? If you turn one way, you go hit the kids, you turn the other way, you go hit the kids, right? So we need to figure out. And I hear you, right? I also hear that we need to pay another $50,000 to come back to the study. You know, I'm looking at the budget, right? In order for us to continue to look at the new design, right? We have to get this grant, which is $50,000, right? Oh, 50 million, sorry, not 50,000. 50,000, I give it to you. 50 million is I can't. Okay, $50 million, right, to come back and do redesign and stuff, right? That's my comment about
Well,
it.
it's not only for the one way. Yeah, it's 3 projects. Well, a lot of it is the bridge itself.
10 million for that one way. Okay, so going back to the enforcement thing, right? I agree with you, right? And I get frustrated because I have to call, put 311 ticket in, people double parking in fire hydrant overnight, using fake parking plat that from DOT, right? How are you guys actually doing enforcement, right? Not just telling us, right? I hear this every time I come to a meeting, that we go work with our local police department and do enforcement, right? There's nothing. I got picture after picture of fake DOT plaque.
So DOT does not have enforcement capabilities. However, we work closely with the precinct and 1PP and have direct contact with every precinct in Brooklyn. So if you have a very specific concern, please feel free to email me and I'll send it to our PD coordinator and they can get in touch with the precinct.
Thank you. I just like sorry, I know this is not about open street and open dinings and stuff. Just like the open dining, I keep sending requests in, nothing happened, including emails and stuff.
What requests are you sending in for dining out?
I put ticket in 311 system
Okay, for what?
for outdoor shack being abandoned.
Okay, so all dining roadway construction is going to be removed by the end of the year. So that's something that we're moving forward with. The abandoned ones are slowly being taken down. But if you give me your 311 number, I can get you specific information on your concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to the room and then, yeah, we'll go to the room. So there's,
Public, yeah.
yeah, but we'll just start in the room and I had seen Miles' hand and then we'll go work our way this way. some
you very much, everybody. For the gentleman in the front, you can forget about phony placards now. The in thing is just an orange vest folded up and left on your windshield. And that's a signal to stay away from my car. Or a hat, yeah.
So as we go into the questions, just if, just being mindful of timing, so if you have a question and you want to lead off with that, or if you have a comment, we're trying to keep everything within like a 3-minute time frame. Thank you so much.
Well, I like to echo some of the comments that were made earlier tonight with regard to inclusion. Okay, I'm from NYU. My name is Miles Davis. Okay, I've been going down to that block and that area that we're talking about during my employment for 40 years. Okay, that's not a misspeak. Okay, 40 years down there at Lutheran Medical Center and at NYU. All right. NYU was involved in all of the discussions regarding the topics that were discussed and brought up tonight. Most of the meetings were held in our boardroom, okay, including one with Congressman Nadler when he had a big interest in increasing the rails on First Avenue. So then all of a sudden, we don't have a seat at the table anymore. I have a chair at the Transportation Committee meeting. We've been left out, you know, and I'm asking that there be a special meeting, a sole meeting with the leadership of NYU at NYU to discuss some of the topics that have been brought up tonight and other topics, because I don't want to get my paperwork too confused here, but I have other Sam Schwartz drawings from all of these meetings that we went to, which include angled parking in front of the emergency room, okay? It include hatched area for emergency vehicles. Neither one of those items were brought up tonight. They were in reports. I have minutes and notes from people from the EDC. I don't even know whether they exist anymore. Adam Lamancy. Name ring a bell? No? Alice Quirk? Not there anymore. Okay. And others. So I've been with all these people. The topic was to have accommodations for NYU. NYU doesn't fix cars and buses on 60th Street and trucks. NYU doesn't sell live poultry. I like to think that we're looked at a bit of a different type of business, so to speak. Okay? And we are very concerned about how ambulances are going to be getting to our facility. Usage of emergency rooms has gone through the roof since all of this was done. And that has to be looked at. NYU has put up one new building since this started, okay, a cancer center where people go for infusion, chemotherapy, et cetera. And we just demolished a building on the corner of 55th Street and First Avenue, and we're going to be putting up a 5-story patient services building. Again, which people have to access, get out of their cars for, maybe be handicapped in doing it, need MTA transportation to get as close to that building as possible. So I am formally requesting that NYU have a meeting with the folks involved like we did all throughout this entire process. My leadership is not happy when I told them I was going to this meeting tonight. Their answer was, we had a deal. We worked with this and we worked on this for years. What happened to that? And a lot of things that we worked on that were accommodations made for the hospital aren't there. Let me finish first. Okay. I'd also like to say that, well, I talked about the 2 new buildings. The issue of red lights on First Avenue is certainly a problem. Gentleman was right. 58th Street down to the 30s. and you have a runway. Okay, so we are concerned about that. We have a lot of people who drive out of 55th Street to make a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn on First Avenue. It's almost impossible. We have a garage on 55th Street that hundreds of cars come out of. And they make their way down, it's a one-way street. They make their way down to First Avenue to make a left-hand turn, right-hand turn. And it doesn't work. So I'm also a little bit concerned. There's been a lot of talk about the work that's going on between like 39th Street, and I think it ends in the around 46th Street or something like that. We believe that there's a gap between that and getting down to where the hospital is. And we're hoping that there's some type of continuity between the work that's being done there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm actually gonna, please hold all of those comments and then take the mic. And there's 2 questions in the back. This way we can stack them and then we'll turn back to you. So I saw a hand there from Sebastian.
Hi all, Sebastian from Uprose tonight. Thank you for this presentation. I have 2 questions. One, are you looking at green infrastructure and climate resilience in the RAISE grant for the Greenway? And why doesn't the Greenway study look at the Greenway from 58th Street to 39th Street rather than just 59th Street to 50th Street? That seems like it's missing the entire 2 entrances of Bush Terminal Pierce Park and an area that will be redeveloped for Steiner Studios.
Great. And if you could pass to the back and then we'll pause and then I'll come back to the other questions.
Hi, I'm a resident on the Sunset Park waterfront. I live on 61st Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. And I walk with my young children along the streets in the waterfront area. I bike and I drive. So I have a comment and then I have 2 questions. I'm happy to see that there's capital dollars or investment of grants in the Sunset Park waterfront area in general, especially at a time when it's lean at the city. So thank you for pursuing the grants. And I just urge that the pedestrian safety considerations are put at the forefront of whatever the redesign is. If I could count on my hands how many times I've been nearly hit by cars with my children, it would probably horrify you in that area. So safety is truly an urgent concern. My questions are specifically for the 60th Street intersection. I wonder, and I have a question if the safety improvements will wait until 2027 or whenever will happen, or if improvements will be made sooner. It's just, I mean, it is a disaster waiting to happen every day there. So if there's a delay in implementation of safety improvements to accommodate this, I just urge for that to be decoupled and for there to be some interim measures put in there as soon as possible. And then the second question has to do with the 3rd Avenue redesign. To what extent will the one-way pair take into account the redesign at 3rd Avenue to mitigate people trying to find faster ways to get from point to point? Please just continue to take the vision of a road diet all the way down to the water. Thank you.
Great. And before we go to your question, we'll give him a chance to respond to those 3 and then we'll go back.
So I'll start with NYU. So before, I guess, the COVID pause happened, like you mentioned, we were actively working with NYU. We had several meetings to address the concerns, mainly ambulance access on 2nd Avenue. So one of the things that you did mention that sort of was geared towards addressing that, the angle parking you mentioned, that was actually angle parking for ambulances, not for regular vehicles. And the hatched area, like the striped area you mentioned, that was to allow for emergency vehicles to go the wrong direction to access NYU. So just like we did before, like I mentioned to the board, we don't have a design yet, but once we get to that stage, obviously we would re-engage with NYU again, just like we did prior to COVID. Our intention is to obviously engage not just NYU, but other stakeholders too. We're not trying to, ignore anybody's needs. We understand everyone has a certain criteria, for their establishment, and we obviously want to be sensitive to that. Then your question regarding the Greenway, That's something that Emily can get back to you from our bike unit. I don't know the particulars of that. That's something that, I don't want to speak out of, term with them. Okay, so she'll address that question. What was your second question? Sorry. Okay, that's the same. She'll. Yep. So for your question regarding the intersection of Third Avenue and 60th Street, I believe the Third Avenue project will address some of that concerns at that intersection. So no, the improvements that would happen to that intersection will not be waiting till 2027. That project does address some of that. I'm not too. Yes, but I'm saying like eventually that's part of I believe, again, don't quote me on this. But I think it's. That's what we're gonna bring back to the board, after the summer break.
So Emily is just clarifying that the Third Avenue redesign and the proposal that the community board voted on is going to be extensive from 19th Street to 62nd Street. So just for those who are not able to hear. Okay, so just we've got the public in the room have their hands up with questions, and then we're going online. So just in terms of folks who are waiting online. So I see two more hands in here, and then we'll go to hands online. You're up, and then we'll go to the next person.
Avenue redesign and the impact on First and Second Avenue.
Yeah, so part of any time we do like any sort of traffic study, we do look at future development. So the future analysis would show like, okay, Third Avenue, these are the improvements made, what would be the impact to that? And that would be looked at.
Question for the DOT. You people have taken down a lot of the stuff for the painting. I don't know if you have to do with the painting over there, DOT, painting the bridge. That's the date.
Please ask your question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what I want to ask is that they left a mess. They took the things down. There's garbage all over the place, bolts, screws, and everything that could be hazardous to. It's bad enough how bad 60th Street is already. So there's a lot of bolts and things all over the floor, all over.
So can you escalate that? Can city DOT escalate to state DOT the problem with debris and the problem with trash and the problem with the garbage underneath the BQE?
I heard you also say that the closed half of the intersection as well, you wanted that mentioned.
Please use the mic.
At 60th Street has not been reopened. Like the walk signs are still blocked. It's like truly no one cares about that intersection and someone will die.
So Emily, can you comment on this? This is state DOT painting work and there's trash and debris, and then also the safety improvements. The fact that parts of it was closed because of that. Can you respond to what you have escalated to state DOT?
Sorry. So that is state DOT project. That's something that I can bring up to them. We can also send inspectors out to issue violations in order for them to follow their stipulations, such as cleanup. And then the second part, what was it? Okay, what street is it? Okay. I'll bring that up.
We have email exchanges with city DOT, Emily, starting from many months ago on this specific issue. So this is about the 60th Street, 3rd Avenue intersection. So we've been escalating this. Community Board 7 has been escalating this intersection through city DOT to state DOT. So all we just have is a record saying that we're waiting on answers from state DOT, Emily. That you're waiting on answers. Okay. and it goes back to summer of 2023. So do we expect, when would we expect a response on that?
Get a reply, I'll be sure to send you a response.
Could you ask state DOT to come to our May 1st meeting when you all are presenting Reconnecting Communities?
Request that of them, yes.
Okay, so we'll add this as an agenda item. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna go, we've got one question, last question up here in person, and then we will go online.
Hello, this is Jonathan Martinez from NYU Langone Hill. Can you talk more specifically in terms of relocating the bus stop, which at this moment runs northbound, but according to your design is going to go southbound? How would that affect, what type of plans or what type of concrete actions you're planning to take, given that, for example, one of our facilities in 5610 Second Avenue, just in February, we have 6,000 visits from patients. So what type of consideration you are taking, and how would you plan to involve us in those talks as well?
Yeah, so with the bus reroute with the conversions, originally we had engaged MTA as far as what the bus reroute would look like. And that's where, based on their feedback, that's how we decided First Avenue would go northbound and Second Avenue go southbound. As far as the stops, I don't think we had picked exactly those particular locations where the stops would be, but that's something that would work with MTA and our bus stop management. So it wouldn't just be like DOT's decision. It would obviously involve MTA. Yep.
Jeremy, can I get your help just maybe opening up for two people? We can go back to back, and then we can, for questions, just online, you maybe take two questions. Yeah. Just the people who have questions.
Sam Sierra? Sam, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, do you have more than one device on, Sam? We're getting a lot of
Yes, I
echo.
did a moment ago. Can you hear me better?
Much better.
It's not a question, it's more of a concern. One is with regard to the transparency or lack thereof of the DOT with regard to their intentions. I have a question as to whether or not this plan has factored in the issue of last mile trucking in our community. To the gentleman from NYU Hospital who rose and spoke of transparency and that there should be a meeting at the boardroom, I wholeheartedly agree with him. However, in that boardroom, there should be stakeholders from our community as well. I would ask that the leadership be told that this is not only about NYU, this is about the community of Sunset Park and the manner in which this is going to impact us all. That's pretty much what I wanted to state. I'm very concerned with regard, once again, of the lack of transparency. And thank you for the time.
We can go to the next question, and then we'll.
I have Vanessa Cordero next. Vanessa, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening, all. I too have a concern with the transparency. I feel that the businesses, specifically NYU, are given more say rather than the residents themselves, who are going to be affected by this more than anything. Transportation having things in one direction is going to change the way people move around in their own communities. And I think that should have been something that should have brought up to everybody else. My next question is, did you guys take an effect of the fact that NYU has 55th Street between 1st and 2nd Street closed off as well? And how does that affect the flow of traffic? because there's a lot of congestion, and if that street was opened up, specifically when there's a lot of ambulances responding, that's something that can ease the flow of traffic. And is this up for a vote for the community, or this is just something you guys are making the community aware of and the community has no say? Because I find it concerning that even the community board wasn't involved, but NYU was. And the community board should have a seat at whatever, as well as the residents of anything that's going on in the community when it's being thought of and not just when it's already put in place.
And maybe we'll, if you can respond to those two, and then we'll keep going through to the other questions that have come up.
So in regards to the question of transparency, I think what's getting lost here is we were not to the point where we had something to present to the community. Like I mentioned, when Sam Schwartz did their study, DOT reviewed it, but we never got to the point where we can come to the community and say like, okay, well, this is what First Avenue we envisioned to look like. This is what Second Avenue we envisioned to look like. Before we could get to that point, obviously COVID occurred, and there was no funding to continue to that point. And that's where I think there's this, I guess, gray area as far as transparency. So there was no intent on DOT or EDC's part to not involve the community or other stakeholders. You know, and it's like I said, going forward, whatever the grant, if the grant goes through and we're able to get that funding to get to that phase where we do get to design, we would obviously go to the stakeholders and obviously the community to get their input. And you know, work together to see, you know, what that First and Second Avenue would look like.
Okay, so then I'll
May I
just,
interject real quickly? What is the impact that this is going to cost to Third and Fourth Avenue? Because if you make that one way, most of the traffic is going to shift to Third Avenue and Fourth Avenue, which are already backed up with trucks and commuters, especially during the morning when there's traffic on the BQE, that people go local.
So we, like, part of the study looks at origin and destinations. So a lot of the traffic on Second and Third Avenue that was modeled, we just shifted conservatively. We assumed that they would stay on Second and First Avenue. Obviously, we know some vehicles will divert to Third and Fourth Avenue, but a lot of the vehicles from the study Sam Short said they were local origination, which meaning they had businesses on Second and First Avenue.
okay, I'm just gonna, before we go to any other questions, I'm just gonna state that what we're hearing is you'd come back with a design and the time for stakeholder consultation. And that is your proposal, is that if the grant comes through, you would come back with design and time for stakeholder consultation. So if any questions have anything to do with that, I think we've established that that piece has not happened and it will happen. So if there are other types of questions, if people, we can unmute you. If there are any other questions from board members or anyone else online, but we've established that.
I have Megana Nyack next. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you see me or hear me at least?
We could hear you and we could see your photo.
Okay, hi. So my name is Megan Nyack. This is a question for Emily Riquelme, who I emailed several times, never heard a response. I would like a response tonight. I'm the PTA president of PS 939. I have been begging the New York City precinct, DOT, anyone who would listen, the state senator, to have interim measures for 60th and 3rd. You just had at the beginning of the presentation how it's one of the most dangerous intersections. I witnessed a child almost being hit. And I'm just wondering, are we waiting for someone to die or to be hit before interim measures are put in place immediately? We have schools on both sides of 60th and 3rd, and every day it's like, you know, you're running for your life and it's very, very stressful. We don't deserve it, and the residents don't deserve it either. So I want a response today about when my email will be responded to about the interim solutions that will be put in place immediately, because it's needed.
Hi, Megan. I'm very familiar with you, and I have responded to several emails. I do want to
No,
know
not the
that
recent, no, not the recent ones where you haven't responded since
Excuse me,
once.
thank you. I gave you time to speak. So for 3rd and 60th, I have mentioned before to the board that the extent of safety improvements has been done to that intersection, that there is no more space, and we are constrained by that. We cannot add any more safety improvements. So the things that are already on the street, which have been recently installed within the last 2 years, yes, I can pull up what we've done. But we are taking a look at that intersection. That intersection is a priority for us. With the 3rd Avenue study, which I have mentioned to the PTA several times at the school, we will be doing, we'll be able to present more of what we're able to do, since there will be a lane reduction and a protected bike lane. So once we have that lane reduction, that opens up a lot of more space in which we can add pedestrian improvements. Because with the current, how it's currently laid out, there's nothing else that we can do, unfortunately.
Okay, so that question, or that statement would have been helpful. There were 3 emails that I sent that were not responded to. I'm aware of the 3rd Avenue thing. I'm aware of all of that. What I am saying is, like, someone's going to get hit and someone's going to die now. So what I'm hearing you say is there's nothing that can be done right now, and we just have to continue to risk our lives.
So
That's what
I can actually jump in, because we want to keep going through other questions that have happened. The Community Board 7 has been escalating the 3rd Avenue intersection at 60th Street for a long time. And so as part of the 3rd Avenue redesign, the vote that just happened and just came through, that looked at and making sure that we had changes to that intersection. Maybe before we go to the next set of questions, Emily, can you just provide an update on the timing for the 3rd Avenue redesign, when you're going to be coming back to the community board, and the understanding of what implementation would look like? Because I think that gets to the comment that's coming in.
Yeah, so regarding the 3rd Avenue safety improvement project, we did receive the vote from the board, I believe a month ago. We are currently in design. We are also concurrently doing extensive outreach to all stakeholders, which means going back to the PTA and all the schools, as well as speaking to the IBZ and several other stakeholders, such as NYU as well. We told the board that we were going to come back in spring. However, because of that extensive outreach that we know that we need to do, we will be coming back in the fall. So that implementation might be moved a little bit further if all goes according to plan, and the board supports the plan.
And on this, the RAISE grant, should it come through, also includes the possibility of additional measures on 60th Street. Like, I looked at the drawings that were mentioned in the Sam Schwartz study, and they had curb extensions and stuff that are not currently part of the design. Am I understanding correct that that would be factored in separately, or is that all part of one proposal?
So it is 2 separate proposals. I believe the 3rd Avenue implementation will precede the RAISE grant. So EDC and ourselves will have to really take into account the changes on 3rd Avenue for 1st and 2nd.
Then you might have to come back again also with the feedback from the one-way pairs, and maybe have more than one round of improvements on 60th.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you don't get the grant, will you still be going ahead with your design proposal and your community stakeholder process for the RAISE grant for the one-way conversions? Okay, so if there is, so establishing that fact, if RAISE grant doesn't come through, the proposal for the one-way conversions and all those next steps don't happen. If they do happen, the timing that you would come back to the community board would be when, roughly? If you get the RAISE grant, roughly when would you expect to come back to the community board for that stakeholder? Oh, good,
Mike, sorry, we
good
can't
point.
hear
Sorry,
you.
we can't hear you. Okay, so the question was posed, if they get the raise grant, when would they come back for the community stakeholder process?
So just in the moment, if we get the grant, it would be important for DOT to collect new traffic data. And so from a process perspective, it might make sense that we together come back to the community board, maybe talk about the scope of data collection, do the data collection, additional data analysis, stakeholder outreach, develop the design, come back to the community board to present a very preliminary design for more feedback.
Fall of 24, fall of 24. Okay,
So just to drive the point again, there's a lot more data collection, analysis, planning, design work before we're implementing anything.
yeah, okay, so that's good. So then, are there any, we have a whole other agenda item that we have to get to, and we have people who are here to give public comment for that. So I just want to ask, are there any other questions? Okay. Great, okay. And people might not have been able to hear you, Jeremy, so could you just repeat that
Oh,
again?
thank you.
Okay.
There are two questions in the Q&A. There's a lot of commentary and chat. Tomorrow morning, I will print it out, share that with board leadership, EDC, and DOT.
Okay, so we'll go to the two questions and then we're going to close this and then go to the next agenda item.
Brian Howald asked about Second Avenue between 29th and 39th Streets, as well as 29th between Second and Third. The construction was previously announced for 2024, but DOT's slide says July 26.
Is there another question that you want to read out?
Yes, Frank Proudfoot says, hello, I'm the principal of MS 936 at 59th Street and 3rd Avenue. What considerations were made in this proposal for the safety of students at the 4 schools on the block? Opening up 59th Street across 3rd Avenue will create even more traffic and danger for our communities. Happy to hear you're thinking of scrapping that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, I think DOT's preference is not to open 59th Street under 3rd Avenue. But again, this is something that we'd have to go back again, look at the data collection. Because one of the factors is if 60th Street is made into a one-way westbound, the alternate truck route. And that's something that we'd have to work with our freight mobility team to see what a viable, safe alternate would be for the eastbound truck route. But yeah, DOT totally agrees that, you know, if we can, we'd maintain closing, keeping closed 59th Street at 3rd Avenue, obviously, because that's the best solution for the kids.
Okay, and then there was a question on the timeline, the implementation, 2026. It was is it?
Oh, I think they're referencing the Greenway. Yeah, I'm not on between 29th and 39th.
The Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway Capital Project, it's saying the anticipated construction start is July of 26. And there's I don't know this, but there were previous comment that this was supposed to start sooner for the Greenway. Okay, I guess we'll follow up after. Okay. A point of clarification and then we'll go to the next item. Okay.
I just want to comment upon one of your speakers, Jeremy, talked about 55th Street between First and Second Avenue and the possibility of using that, okay? As a bit of a history lesson, had to be at least 20 years ago, Lutheran Medical Center at the time bought 55th Street from the city of New York. Okay, so 55th Street is now officially demapped. We had to do it in conjunction with building the nursing home across the street, which has a bridge going over to the main hospital. So 55th Street is off the table. The hospital thought it was a good idea until the first snowfall and nobody came, you know, to plow.
Great, thank you. So there are a ton of comments, and I'm gonna just make sure I don't mess this up. If you have additional comments, if you want to send them to the community board and the email, bk07@cb.nyc.gov. So if you have follow-up questions, bk07@cb.nyc.gov. Questions or comments that you want to be able to send through, please do. Jeremy will also take any of the comments that came in and the questions. We'll follow up. And thank you to EDC staff and DOT staff who came in to respond to our questions. Thank you. And we'll be sending out your presentation. So if you guys can make sure we have links to it as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
with
Have a good night.
that.
Get home safe.
Great. And we're going to our next agenda item. So there might be some movement. And the next agenda item is specifically on the BQE revisioning proposal. So if you are leaving, just would ask if you leave quietly. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So if you want to have any side conversations, if you could step outside just to, as a courtesy. Yes, so that's why it would be good to have, actually, if you want to go quickly, Emily, okay. Okay. Jerry, Emily needs to have a yeah.
Jerry, I'll email you. I have your email. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is our one of our new pilots about battery charging for e-bikes. So it's the e-bike battery charging pilot program. What it is called DOT Studio. It's going to be a pilot for 6 months. There was several locations in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, one is in downtown Brooklyn at Jay and Willoughby, and the other one in your district is at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. So what it is that there's 3 different technologies that are being tested. There's going to be 2 different companies testing battery charging units so that they're sort of look like lockers. You put in your batteries and it charges that way. And then we also have a separate company that is doing direct vehicle charging, which is kind of looks like the city bike docks, which you dock it and then that's how it gets the charge. The pilot consists of 100 delivery workers. Each of them get free of cost charging services. And what we really want to get out of it is, we do need to look at e-bike and battery charging as that's the future. And hopefully this informs about placing it in different parts of the city, like parks or NYCHA. And let me see what else. Oh yeah, so on March 8th, we hosted an enrollment fair at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. I don't know how many people we registered, but again, it's part of 100 people, so I can get more information on that if you want.
You want to go to the next
Oh,
item?
yeah. Okay. The next thing is the car-free Earth Day on 4/20. Do you want me to read the questions and the answers? Yeah. Okay, so the first question that I received was, how did DOT consult to decide on the location? The location is on 5th Avenue. It says that you weren't aware until you found out about it on social media. So we have been in communication with David Estrada from the Sunset Park bid. Last week, we had notified him that we were planning a press conference announcement. We also invited him. The location is made by our special events folks who do the DOT event planning, such as things like this and the marathons.
So can I jump in? So there's Car Free Day. It is on April 20th. On Saturday, it is, do you want to just talk about like the time? You can just speak generally to what it is and just make an announcement. It's from what time to what time, what streets?
Oh, yeah. So it is on Saturday, April 20th. There will be several locations across the city where we will be doing a car-free shutdown on the roadway. City Bike has graciously given everybody a free code to ride, to have free unlimited 30-minute rides on a standard City Bike for the day. And so that's what's happening. And the location here is on Fifth Avenue, I believe.
Between 40th and 45th. So between 40th and 45th on Fifth Avenue, during what times will it be car free and shut down?
So it's going to be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This car-free Earth Day is going to be bigger than last year's, and we are extending it for 1 hour this year.
Do you know where the bus route will go?
I don't have that information, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
think that-
but for any event that closes down the street that has a bus route, we have to reroute it. So it will be rerouted.
Will you guys be able to have street ambassadors, let people know businesses ahead of time? And then will there be the no parking signs put up ahead of time as well?
So the no parking signs, let me see. So we will hang no parking signs 2 weeks in advance to the event and a week before the event takes place. So if you want us to flyer the businesses on that location, we'd be happy to. So
Okay. Thank you so much.
confirm that with you, yeah.
Okay. So I think that's good. I think we can, were there any other announcements that you wanted to share from DOT?
Not right now. But if you need anything from me, you have my email.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
Guys.
Thank you so much. So we're just moving to the next agenda item, which is a committee discussion. I also recognize the time. And so I want to be mindful of that. So this is how I will kind of preempt it. I know that there are people who have public comment that they want to make sure that they get a chance to share on BQE revisioning. So if there's anyone, before we jump into the committee discussion, if there's anyone who has any public comment on the BQE revisioning, you can put your hand up so we can make sure to give you the mic. Okay, got one. And then if you're online and you wanted to provide public comment about BQE revisioning, you can put your hand up so then we can turn to you before we jump in.
Hi, Sebastian from Upros again. Just saying that Upros has an event next week, Wednesday, April 10th at 11 a.m. at the intersection of 3rd Avenue and 16th Street, formally launching the BQE Environmental Justice Coalition, along with the 18 other organizations in Brooklyn and Queens, and elected officials from across the corridor in the City Council and the state legislature to make sure that the city and the state administrations stay true to community-based planning centered on environmental justice. So making sure that the input that was heard today based on 3rd Avenue and 60th Street, other concerns about moving freight and vehicles and people along the waterfront, that those are heard and that they are part of a comprehensive planning process that make sure that streets are safe, that we reduce air pollution, and that we make our neighborhoods more equitable, not just here in Sunset Park, but across the corridor, again, with an attention to environmental justice. I have a sign-in sheet here. I don't have a sign-in sheet on Zoom, but if you're interested in learning more, please email transportationjustice@uprose.org. Again, that's transportationjustice@uprose.org. For more details, any questions about the coalition, any ideas or thoughts you have about the BQE visioning process, Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll go, if there's anyone online who has any public comment on the BQE revisioning before we turn to the committee discussion. Okay,
Rose Ushanowski, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, so I have a comment prepared on the BQE revisioning. If I may read it now. So good evening, and thank you for giving me this time. My name is Rose Ushanowski. I'm the Staten Island and South Brooklyn organizer with Transportation Alternatives. As a community partner in the DOT's BQE visioning process, TA reached out to hundreds of neighbors in Sunset Park to hear their vision for a future BQE corridor. Their response was clear: true transformation. The DOT's latest vision proposal for the BQE South does not adequately respond to neighborhood needs in Sunset Park. Safer crossings, enhanced green space, pop-up markets, bike parking, and charging stations are great additions, but they're only a start. The vision must prioritize pedestrian, cyclist, and public transit users as well as calm traffic. Dedicated and protected cycling infrastructure must be part of any plan. This was by residents and it's upheld by facts. There have been 7 preventable fatalities under the BQE between 50th and 60th Streets alone since 2020, including the tragic death of Clara King. Meanwhile, the corridor carries dozens of delivery cyclists daily. Installing micro hubs under the viaduct will only increase demand for cycling space and interactions between cyclists, pedestrians, motorists, and truck drivers. The only way to ensure long-term safety is through a clear delineation of space. This must include protected bike lanes. The use of parking lots under the BQE is both dangerous and uninviting. It increases interactions between motorists and other users and adds to confusion over where pedestrians and cyclists belong. Parking must be deprioritized in a neighborhood where less than half of residents own a car and less than 10% commute to work by car. I implore the DOT to listen to residents most impacted by the BQE and work with city and state partners to use the visioning process as a chance to create real change.
Thank you. I have Milan Powell next. Milan, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. I know you can't see me. My name is Milan Powell. I'm here from FAC, Fifth Avenue Committee. Usually, I would love to be in the room with you guys, but Wednesdays are sometimes really heavy for me up at Hunter College. That being said, I just really want to applaud and uplift what Rose just said. We from Fifth Avenue Committee feel very, very similarly. In addition to that, we submitted our round 3 report to Chairperson Katie for sharing so that people could see the kinds of feedback that we received from the communities that we engaged, which we think is really important. And especially me, who put most of it together, thinks is really important because a lot of that data there is narrative. We took a lot of narrative responses that people submitted in our surveying so that we could really show what people thought about what was being offered to them. And that's so important because the engagement of the community that's going to have to live with these changes or lack thereof is, to me, the most paramount. And so we also really want to uplift what Sebastian of Uprose was plugging. We really support their gathering on Wednesday the 10th. And we would love to be there in whatever capacity that we can. But other people who feel as though this is a prominent issue, we would really like to encourage you to find the time to take part as well. And so thank you guys so much, and I hope everyone's having a wonderful night.
Thank you. I've run out of hands.
Okay. So we'll leave time now for any committee members who wanted to provide any comments or ask any questions. So just to take us back, what we're doing right now is the BQE revisioning proposal. There was a presentation that came forward in November. And the next step of that is we learned that city DOT with state DOT had applied for the federal Reconnecting Communities grant. They received that money. The Reconnecting Communities grant is not just for BQE South, which includes our portion of the revisioning, but it is covering the corridor. And they can choose to look at some of the design improvements and further build out some of the design improvements for BQE South through this grant. I'm not a DOT employee. I'm just trying to do my best understanding and reflecting all this back to you all. We asked DOT Reconnecting Communities, the design proposal that we all saw in November. We asked if they would tell us more about this grant and the next steps. So they're going to come on May 1st. So that is the next agenda item. Our May 1st transportation meeting is we will have the DOT representatives who would be working on the next step for the design study for Reconnecting Communities come. But they have asked us, Community Board 7, on the record for our comments on that initial proposal. So that's why we created the space for an agenda item tonight to say that we can formally send a note back what we thought of the initial proposals. I'll just remind everybody, we heard from a couple of the organizations tonight who were part of that revisioning process, that the vision that came back fell far short in this community in BQE South compared to what other communities' visions were. There were a lot of proposals, there was a lot of feedback that didn't even get addressed, as we heard in some of the comments tonight, and that the sort of scale and ambition and design that was reflected back to us, again, is not commensurate to the types and size and scale of the problems that we're dealing with. Those are things related to safety, they're related to health, they're related to air quality, they're related to design. The list goes on and on. So if there are any other additional questions and comments, but just to say this community board will, what we would like to do is the transportation committee is we're going to be putting a letter together to file all of the things that we have heard from the committee discussions about Third Avenue and about the BQE revisioning proposal that came in. So if anyone wanted to add anything at this point, they could do that. So I'll turn to John and then to Jeremy.
So I will say that over this process, I've been kind of bummed out at the proposals that DOT has presented. They do seem like a lot less than other communities got. That said, I do have a glimmer of hope, right? In that I was glad that DOT sent us the application they sent for Reconnecting Communities. And I know that was in the materials sent out before this meeting. I've been in a reading mood. I was reading the EDC study. I read the Reconnecting Communities thing, and they proposed, or they mentioned in there, possibly funding things like a safety improvement at Prospect Avenue and I think Third. And they also mentioned something in there about something at 64th Street, both of which fall within our district. I'm getting the boundaries right. So I would like us to ask them what those are. And I'm also the board's representative to the BQE Visioning Council. So I've been going to their meetings, and they talked about the possibility of some of their projects being combined into bigger projects. So I would like to say, if they do work on 64th Street, could they maybe explore, for instance, 61st Street, which is an area that is still closed. I know in the EDC's designs they opened up a lot of streets that were previously closed to people and traffic. Could something like that be done with reconnecting communities, especially at 61st Street where there's guardrails that people are crossing? I've seen people with strollers, they try to push their babies over the guardrails. I've seen people on walkers stumble over these guardrails. So I would like to see if that could be explored as part of that. And I'll also add, since 64th Street has a lot of flooding problems, if that could be explored. I know DOT is looking into, or from the Visioning Council, they mentioned they are looking into sustainability projects, and they weren't sure whether they could be part of this or not. But I would encourage them to, if they are considering something for 64th Street, to make sure it has a sustainability component if it doesn't already.
Thank you. Jeremy?
So I'm sharing my opinion here. There is no local BQE revisioning study. That's a Third Avenue study. Their study does not touch the BQE whatsoever. Doesn't touch the structure, doesn't change the traffic volume, doesn't change the emissions. They have proposed to the community north of us, putting a park over a portion of the highway. They've proposed a park over a portion of the highway in the south. In our community, they have proposed additional last mile facilities. They have not proposed that for the north or the south. They have not proposed new parks for us. And to get to John's point about the flooding, nobody talks about the flooding. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues, because so many of the other plans depend on mitigating the flooding. People don't use crosswalks because there's a deep, deep puddle with nowhere for the water to drain. City DOT, state DOT do not address that.
So we'll include all of this in our comments back on the proposal. Is there anything else that needs to be, if there's any other comments for anyone who's listening to this after the fact, if you want to provide to the community board on the BQE revisioning South proposal, you can send an email to bk07@cb.nyc.gov. No other hands are up. There's a hand in the room, so we'll just turn over to you.
So Emily mentioned a meeting tomorrow concerning this, or was I confused?
For Manhattan. Yeah. QE Central.
You can view all the events that DOT is doing for the BQE revisioning on it's bqevision.com or .net. If you search BQE Vision in Google, you'll find it, and they have a list of events. They have 2 coming up focused on this Manhattan Bridge project they're doing.
Okay, so as we move to close the meeting, I'm just going to recap a couple of things that we heard and what's upcoming. So our next Transportation Committee meeting is on May 1st. DOT will be coming to talk about this federal grant that they got on reconnecting communities. Before that, we will be providing a letter back on the BQE South revisioning proposal from Community Board 7. And then our next meeting after that is the first Wednesday in June before we break for the summer. And if there were any other comments and questions that came in that you would like to share on the first agenda item, which was on the one-way conversions, please do send them to Community Board 7 so that we can continue to compile them into the feedback that we have. And we heard tonight that we expect DOT and EDC to come back if they receive funding in the fall with an outline of a process for design and community engagement. Thank you, everybody, for joining a 2-hour Transportation Committee meeting. Have a good night. Thank you. Thank you.
3.5 left. No, the Equinor thing was 2 hours. It took them an hour and a half to break down the room.
Did it really?
Yeah. I love having dinner at 10. Yeah, we're a one-person operation with the tech. Miles, what's your email address? Because I only have it on the computer. I have to send it.
Sure. It's miles.davis@nyulangone.org.
Thank you. Okay. .com or .org?
Yeah.
Glad I asked. Yeah, tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Well, they're used to it and they deserved it. I held back. I usually don't with them. Two. DOT, especially DOT, deserves everything they get.
Did you know we own 50/50?
I didn't know you own it.